Hello and welcome to another episode of Desi Outdoor Podcast. This is our interview episode and we have Kuntal Joyshar with us today. Kuntal is a mountaineer from Mumbai and is an inspiration for many. He's a software engineer by education, but he has climbed Mount Everest twice. Once as a dietary vegan and the second time he only used vegan gear. Now how cool is that, right? So today Kuntal will be talking a bit about his Everest journey as a vegan, his mountaineering course, and his transition from the corporate world to the world of mountains. Also, if you like this episode, you can follow us on Instagram at Desi Outdoor Podcast and stay updated with our upcoming episodes. Hi Kuntal, welcome to the show.
Happy to be here on the show and look forward to our conversation.
Awesome. Shall we start then?
Sure.
You are a software engineer by profession.
Yeah.
How did this transition from engineering to Everest happen? And do you still code these days?
I actually code all the time. That is my main bread and butter. I started as a passionate technologist and someone who really just wanted to code all my life. But then one of my mentors thought that that is not the most valuable use of my time and that I should be building software teams and I should be mentoring those teams, and which is something I really believe in. I think it's important to empower others. But at some point in my career, I switched and I got into running a company. And this is when Everest also came into my life. And I realized that climbing Everest is a very big commitment. It's like a serious commitment. My life is going to be on the line. My family's future is going to be on the line, and it did not make sense to do a half-assed job at coding and do a half-assed job at training or do a half-assed job at running the company, which is a full-time job in itself. I can't be climbing mountains 4 or 5 months a year and then also be running a company, because when you're running a company, you have to be there all the time. So at some point during that journey, I decided, or not, I didn't decide. I was just going to quit my job and going to go climb Everest. But then I was talking to one of my mentors, and he said, "Look, everyone has to pay bills. And if you're going to quit the job, you have some savings, sure. But those savings are at some point going to eventually run out. And at that point, you won't be able to climb mountains. So, a smarter thing to do here would be maybe you should go back and become an engineer, which is something that you are really good at. That way, we can continue keeping you hired. We can continue giving you some work. We can give you a lot of time off, because then you will just be an individual contributor. You will no longer be mentoring anyone. You will no longer be running a company. You will just be coding on your own. We'll be giving you bite-sized, smaller-sized projects that you can finish very quickly, and that way you will get best of both the worlds." And I sort of thought that that was the best approach, and I think I went as a part-time engineer sometime in 2011. So I code for paying my bills. And it's not as if I'm not a passionate technologist. I'm still passionate about technology, but I'm far more passionate about mountains. So I'm glad that I have a job. I'm grateful to all my mentors and all these people who continue keeping me employed, and so that I'm able to pay my bills and I'm able to take care of my responsibilities at my home, and at the same time able to go and pursue something that I'm passionate about.
That's actually a great way of doing both the things that you love doing. And with respect to the transition from your corporate life to mountains, how do you think mountains have changed you?
Before I went into the mountains, I was this guy who worked in the startup world. And as I went through a lot of my startup journey, maybe at some point my patience level actually got a lot lower. I think once I started climbing mountains and sort of realized that getting to the top is not in our hand. Forget getting to the top, sometimes even our life is not in our hand. We simply don't control what happens on a mountain once we start climbing it. And once you sort of make that realization, and that you understand that there is no place for low patience here, that you have to stay patient. There could be times where you could be in a very bad snowstorm for like 6 7 days, or there is a time when you get injured and the injury is so bad that you can't even climb one floor. So when you realize so many things, you suddenly start building a much higher level of patience. And if there is one thing that I have to point to you, that mountaineering or going into the mountains has sort of changed in me dramatically, is has brought this different level of patience in me. I'm far more patient today compared to what I was 10 years ago. Of course, there's a whole bunch of other things that mountains changed in me, but I just wanted to share one, and which is mostly patience, a lot of patience.
I can totally relate to what you just said about the patience part because I felt similar when I came back to the city after my mountaineering course. And speaking of which, how did you select your mountaineering course and what was the experience like?
When I decided that I wanted to do my mountaineering course, of course, I researched the Indian mountaineering courses, and I ended up searching on Google for mountaineering courses across the world. And this is where the ego part of me got better of me, and I started searching. My search terms were hardest mountaineering course in the world. And I stumbled upon this course called the 42-day mountaineering course by Mountain Training School in Chilean Patagonia. And I'm like, what's so hard about it? Why is it called the hardest mountaineering course? And so I started going and looking at all the alumni, and started looking at the videos, and started looking at the description of the course, and it like seemed terrifying. And that less than like 30-35% of people even made it through that course. I'm like, this is amazing, this is challenging, this is what I should do. And the thing was that this mountaineering course was a instructor guided course and a student run course. There were only 6 students in the course, and there were 2 instructors who were IFMGA guides, almost of the quality of people who would regularly feature on in an alpinist magazine or some of the top mountaineering magazines in the world. And I thought that this would be something that I should really try and do. That I can, because it's a student run course, then everything from packing to rations to navigation to understanding the glacier to building the anchors to building my tents to doing every single thing, I will have to do it on my own. Instructors are just there guiding us. So I thought this is a great way, because this way I can ramp up quicker, like I can grow quickly as a mountaineer. And so I went on to this course, and they had actually outlined that you have to be in a certain physical fitness state before coming into the course. And I said, yeah, yeah, I already have done so many hikes in the Himalaya, and I have just recently started hiking in the Sayadri as well, and I've done so many tough hikes in the Sayadri. I mean, how hard can this be? I mean, how much physical fitness could be required? So I sort of didn't pay a lot of attention at the physical fitness. And I still remember that on day one, after I landed in Chile, and then we took another flight, and we reached the base camp. And that evening, they said that, hey, we are going to do a nice, gentle 30-minute hike to the top of this small hill. But everyone has to do it in their double plastic boots. Like, this is the first time I was going to be wearing double plastic boots in my life. So so we go on this short, seemingly super easy hike, and of course within like 10 minutes I'm panting like crazy. I'm the last guy. Everyone is at least 5, 10, maybe 15 minutes ahead of me, and this is like a super short hike. And that's when I realized, man, I am not in good shape. But I said, okay, fine, maybe this is just day one. I'm acclimating to this newer environment. And then as we started accessing the northern ice cap, and the entire course was supposed to be about 35 days on the northern ice cap. Northern ice cap is the third largest ice cap in the world behind Antarctica and southern ice cap, which is also in Patagonia. So here we are on this remote ice cap, and every single day that passes we are carrying loads of about 35 kgs. And because it's closer to Antarctica and it's summertime, the day starts at 3 in the morning and ends at 12 in the night. There's like a no light window of only 3 hours. So really there's light all the time. So I'm not even mentally able to adjust to that. I'm not able to like get better sleep. And now, when you are part of a team, you also have to do team activities, which also meant that I had to cook meat for others, whereas I was just eating vegan food myself. So mentally also that was a little hammering for me that I had to cook a dead animal for others. I wanted to sort of adjust in this environment because I wanted to build that skill and become that tough mountaineer. As we started doing glacier training, there were days when I would come back and I would count instances where I thought that I was just dead. And every day I would count instances like today I maybe twice I was going to die, maybe 5 times I was going to die today. And every day those instances started sort of piling up, and mentally I was getting beaten every single day. And others on the course were far superior to me. I think this was about 13th or 14th day, and this was like one of our exit points, because beyond this, if I had to exit, then that would cost me a bomb in terms of just paying for the helicopters and paying for a whole bunch of things. And I said, look, I don't have so much money, so I might as well exit right now, pay more money for the flight, and just go home. I still remember the dialogue that I told my instructor that night, that I totally underestimated the course and I very much overestimated my own abilities. And I think it's time to sort of accept defeat, accept the fact that I need to become much better before pursuing something like this. And I think I quit. And it was bad. I think that was like the first time in my mountaineering life I really cried. Like, I really cried that night. It was tough, but it was the right thing to do here, and so I quit. And that was a great lesson learned. I came back home and I started working harder towards my fitness. So yeah, that's a bit about the mountaineering course. Sorry, a long bit about mountaineering course.
I know these courses are just insane at times. I mean, you go through so much, right? When I was doing my course, I was constantly thinking what will happen if a student breaks their leg or gets injured at any of the higher campsites. How could you possibly get them back to the civilization, right? So, which brings me to my next question. People in India are still apprehensive about going on treks because we are still kind of lagging behind when it comes to the safety on mountains, right? So, how do you feel that we as a community can change that and make mountains safer for everyone?
I think helicopter rescue would most definitely make a huge difference, because if you look around the world, everywhere from Alps to Andes, or even in Russia, or for that matter, even in Nepal, anywhere you go around the world, like heli rescue is a norm. At the same time, I think I want to take a little step back, and it's slightly unfair to compare because most of the Western nations, they already have a culture which is so outdoor focused, which is so mountain focused, whereas we simply don't have that culture here in India. But then in last 10, 15 years, there has been such a growth happening in the adventure field, but there's very few good operators out there in the market. I think before we fix the tougher, more difficult issues, I think we need to fix our culture, and also the agencies need to really start working hard and start asking their guides to do mountaineering courses, start asking their guides to do wilderness courses, start asking their guides to learn more about leave no trace, start enforcing those rules on the treks, have better documentation or have better written content on the website, tell people what the reality is, so that people also come better prepared. It would be good to have heli rescues and satellite phones and all those things in place, but I think before that there is a lot more that needs to be fixed.
I agree to that, especially the part that you said about our culture with respect to the outdoors. That has to change. And I believe it will over time. It's just a matter of time.
Right.
Okay, so I have seen that you have always been very vocal about veganism. So, what exactly inspired you to become a vegan, and what was the experience like of going to Everest as a vegan?
The single and the only reason I'm a vegan is for the animals, because I truly think that animals are here with us, not for us, and that they have equal right to live, love, and enjoy this life as much as we do. And of course, eventually, I also learnt about things like animal agriculture contributing to climate change. And so now I'm not only a vegan for animals, I'm also a vegan for our planet. And then in 2009 10, I decided that I was going to climb Everest. And I was talking to my expedition leader, And just in general, I was looking up in the mountaineering community groups and everything, and there was this general sense I got that, look, you have to eat meat, you have to eat dairy, and you have to eat eggs to have the strength to climb the mountains, and at the same time even stay warm on the mountains. In spring of 2019, I was climbing Everest from the north side, and I still know that every single time when we went on a climbing acclimatization rotation or we went on the summit push, the night before, every climber was fed tons and tons of meat. And I was just shocked. I'm like, why would you eat so much meat before you're going on a summit push? It almost seems counterintuitive or counterproductive to me, because at that altitude, meat is simply not going to digest well in your body. And if by any chance that meat is infected and you end up getting an infection, your climb is practically over at that point. For me, it was like, I'm going to do it as a vegan or I'm not going to climb mountains. To me, my ethics, my values, especially in terms of animal rights, is far more important than mountaineering. And I said, let's see what happens. Vegan diet was never a hindrance throughout the entire journey. I have done like what, more than 25 plus serious Himalayan expeditions, and tons and tons of Sayadri treks, and not in one single instance in last 10 years I remember getting indigestion or even a diarrhea. I personally feel that for me, this is, I have never had stomach problems because I eat vegan food. And on top of that, plant based foods typically tend to be much lighter on your stomach. So, chances of you feeling sluggish is a lot lesser. So, in that sense, I think I have some sort of an advantage over most other climbers. Like, I may not be the physically fittest on the team, but then by getting these other smaller advantages, I end up being much fitter than most of these guys. It's not like you are suddenly going to eat vegan food and you're going to become a superman. That's not how it works. So that's my sort of take.
Of course, of course. I'm sure it takes a lot of training to achieve something like this. Which brings me to my final question. How do you think someone should train for a trek? Like, what would be your top three training recommendations?
I think people need to first of all just start trekking. If you're just going to hit the gym and then suddenly show up to climb a 6,000-meter mountain, maybe you will make it. But if you have hiked before, and if you're someone who constantly hikes all the time, then first of all you are training those group of muscles and building fair bit of muscle memory. New beginners struggle quite a bit is understanding the pace. Then this all stuff can only happen if you are actually doing it, and you're doing it as your primary activity. Let's say if there's lack of access to the mountain, most people live in buildings that are 5, 8, maybe 10 floors tall. So another activity would be to do a lot of stair climbing to sort of again mimic what is going to happen to you on the mountains. Stair climbing is nowhere as dynamic as mountaineering or trekking. You would have to use your entire body when you're mountaineering or trekking, whereas in stair climbing that is not much the case. You can do those things by maybe start skipping 3 4 stairs, by widening your stance, by coming down backwards, by maybe doing some jumps. So you can like sort of spice up stair climbing. So that's one more. And then the third would be, I think you would have to add in fair bit of strength training into your regime. And I think this is pretty much doing a lot of fundamentally sound body weight exercises, stuff such as push-ups, pull-ups, squats. So things that are going to work your entire body. Squats, of course, I don't need to tell anything about squats. They're just going to help you build a very strong lower body, a lower back, and a great core. So I think it's just combination of these tried and tested exercises that you can do. But I think I would focus more on spending a lot of time going in the mountains and building that strong base.
These are some really good tips for people who wish to start hiking or trekking. So you can just make a note for people who wish to start doing this in the near future. And with that, we come to the end of this episode. By the way, you all can follow Kuntal on Instagram and keep up with his adventures. His handle is Kuntal J. I am adding it to the show notes or description for your convenience. Thank you, Kuntal, for taking out the time to do this, and I am looking forward to see more of your adventures in the mountains. So, thank you. See you all next week.
Thank you. Bye bye.